Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. This is my testimony video how I came back to the Lord to really start trying to live for Him, and how, I guess, like what I went through before I got saved and how the Lord brought me back to Him. I guess I will start with a little bit about my upbringing. My mom was a Christian, and she was kind of like, she was in a lukewarm church, and I don't think she really had like the knowledge and understanding to raise us fully in the ways of the Lord. Like, we had like the influence of the world in our home, but she was trying, and I knew that God was real when I was a child because of her and because of my grandparents who lived next to us, and my grandma was a believer, so we would go to church, and I had seeds planted of the gospel, and I believed in God. I didn't have any doubts that God was real. And then, during my childhood, my sister and I would go back and forth between my mom and my dad's house, and my dad was not a believer. So that was kind of the environment that I grew up in, being a child, where my mom was a Christian, and then my dad would discourage us from, pursuing the Lord, and maybe not intentionally, but I think he was used in that way. An example would be like if I was a child and I wanted to listen to the Christian radio in the car, he would kind of make fun of it and be like, "Oh, this is terrible," and turn it off and listen to something else. So I think that it was a bad influence because, as a child, you want to please your father, you want to, him to be happy with you, and you look up to your parents. So I think that was like bad seeds planted of him mocking Christianity. And then with my mom's side, she was trying, but we weren't really taught like how to really pray or how to really seek the Lord. But we did go to church, and I did know that God was real, and I had a desire to live for Him, but I also had that worldly influence of like we would watch worldly movies, or we're allowed to listen to worldly music. But another thing is that I did go to a Christian school, so that was pretty good because a lot of public schools are not, worse influences for children. So I did go to a private Christian school for up until I think freshman year, which was pretty good. Around that time that I moved into my dad's house, I think I was 7 or 8 years old. I decided to get baptized when I was around 7 or 8, and I really felt the presence of God. I knew that God was real, and I just didn't know how to really like fully live for Him or seek Him or repent yet, so I believe in God, but like I said, I was just kind of also feeding on things of the world. And around the time, I think that I was around 13 years old, my mom started dating this guy who moved in with us, and he had 5 children, and that's when things really changed in our childhood, because you can imagine. So at that point, it was me and my 2 sisters in the house and my mom, so it was like us 4 girls, and then he moved in with his children, so it was a lot of people in the house, and a lot of things started changing because he was a lot more like strict than my mom. So because of that, and because of all the people in the house and things changing so much, like a bunch of new rules, and around that time, so around like 13, 14, I started to become very bitter and resentful towards my mom and towards him. because I thought that the things that they were doing were hypocritical. For example, like, we have certain rules, like we were barely allowed to have people over, almost not allowed to go into anyone's house or anything like that. Uh, even like at some point, I wasn't allowed to go to church anymore at the church I was going to. So I became very bitter against them, and some of the things that they were doing, like, I saw them, move in with each other before they were married, and they would smoke cigarettes and things like that, or, I felt like treat us a certain way, like the children and stuff. And so seeing that, I became bitter and resentful towards them, and I feel like that kind of caused me to become rebellious, because when I was younger, and even though like my mom, she didn't like keep certain things out of the household, like certain worldly influences and things like that we didn't really know about, but I had a desire to please her and be obedient to her. Like, I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to, I didn't want to get in trouble. My older sister, she would sometimes do things and get in trouble, and I saw what she would do, and I would be like, oh, I wanted to please my mom. I wanted to, I didn't like that feeling of doing what was wrong and things like that. So, but I guess, around the time I turned, I was like 14 and things like that, that's when I started to, become more bitter and resentful, because of all the children living in the house that, just kind of showed up and everything changed. And around that time, I think that, I was going to the Christian school, but around that time I started hanging out with a certain girl from the school who was not a very good influence. And so on the weekends when, like I said, like at my mom's house, I wasn't really allowed to have certain friends over, or wasn't allowed to go places with people. But with my dad, I went with him on the weekends, vacations and summers. So, when it was his weekend, he would let me go spend time, go over to this girl's house, and it was kind of not a good influence on me. And she introduced me to this guy who actually lived like 2 blocks away from me at my mom's house. So that, that friendship, I started to try certain things and not get heavily into it, but I think that's the first time I tried drinking. I think around that same period of time, I went to a music festival with my dad, and that's the first time that I tried smoking weed. And I didn't really like it, but I was, kind of going that way of thinking those things were cool. Like I went to school and I was like, oh, I smoked weed this weekend with my dad and stuff like that. And so, but around that time, like I said, that the guy that she introduced me to, he lived next to me. I ended up sneaking out to hang out with him because we got in communication, and we ended up sleeping together. And I think that's when things really got really bad for me and changed a lot, that I became very depressed, and I actually got very, very sick. I ended up getting a STI, but it was very bad to the point, like I think I had a fever of 105, where I was hallucinating. I was very sick and in bed for at least a week. And because of this, my mom didn't know what was going on, but my dad knew, because he's like putting things together. He's like, it was a UTI. He's like, oh, you have a UTI, you have these new friends. And he ended up, telling my mom, because I ended up telling them, and then they ended up telling my mom that I was sneaking out. So that's when things got little bit, you know, worse, I guess. Like, not worse, but like I try to tell my mom. I remember them talking to me, and uh, you know, I try to tell them that I really didn't like living there, that I hated my life, I felt depressed, and you know, they felt bad for me. They tried, like they bought me a lemonade on the way to school. They, you know, obviously I was I was grounded, but you know, they felt bad. My mom said that she confessed to me that she had struggled with, you know, depression and suicidal thoughts too. But I don't think they really knew how to help me, because that's kind of when where the conversation ended, and I was still dealing with that. So, you know, I continued to try to sneak out, and I think that summer, after that had happened, I went to a youth camp with my friend over the summer, and it was very blessed, very beautiful experience where the youth group, we all grew very close together, and we really like had a desire to live for Christ and grow closer together. And I just had a love for the Lord after that. You know, they would have like nights, I think every night or something like that, we would go to the church and worship, and this is when I really knew like God is real. Feeling his presence and desiring him, and I had such a strong desire for him after that, you know, I just wanted to spend time with those people. And I excuse me, I'm trying to think. I just remember having a strong desire for the Lord, but again, I still didn't know to completely cut off the things of the world. So after that, it's like I was reading. I love to read the Bible. I remember like not having really an interest in social media. Like I would go on there and I'd be like, oh, this is vain. You know, I want to spend time with the Lord. I don't want to look at this stuff. But you know, I didn't fully like shut that door to the world, where I was still listening to worldly music. And I think because of that, you know, all that stuff came back in, because I didn't really know how to pray, how to walk in repentance. And then, you know, things kept happening at my house that would cause me to be bitter and resentful. One of these things was that, you know, I was told my mom, like, Mom, like I was crying. I was testifying to her, you know, I really met the Lord. I really love him. I really want to live for him. And I can't say that I blame them, but they still saw me as a rebellious person, a rebellious child. So they're still like, you know, kind of would speak that over me or see me as that. And I think, you know, maybe because of that, they said like, oh, you're not allowed to go to youth group anymore. Because they were watching, you know, videos and things online, and they're like, youth groups aren't in the Bible, they're not biblical, you don't need to go there. And they would have us like watch sermons at the house, but they wouldn't let me go to church or see people, you know, outside of school. And so because of that, I again became bitter and resentful. And around that time, I think I also slept with like 2 more people, and this was before I left my dad's house, where I either was at my dad's house or like on his time where I was staying with him and I'd go hang out with somebody, or I snuck out. And then right before my 15th birthday, I decided to try to move in with my dad, because legally how it was is my mom had custody of us. But if a child chooses to live with the other parent and decides to go and live there and basically stay there and say, I'm not coming back, and that parent is deemed safe, you know, if both parents are safe and have a decent living situation, then I think a child over 14 could choose who to live with. And so that's something that I did, is that when I I think I went to my dad's house and I told my mom I'm not coming back home. And this was really sad. It was I think right after my 15th birthday or right before. And, it was very sad. They had like gotten a cake for me and all these things. I know that they really tried. I don't think that they were as close to the Lord as they should have been, so they maybe not know how to handle certain situations. But I know that they did care about me. But anyway, so around that time, when I was like 15, that's when I moved in with my dad. And that's when things started to get worse. I told myself, like, I was deceived. I deceived myself and thought, like, when I move in with my dad, I'll be able to go to church. He'll let me go to church. And I'll be able to, fellowship with people. I'll be able to have a relationship with God and freedom. But, when I moved into my dad's house, it's like such a bad environment, a bad influence. And my dad was very lenient. So it's like I didn't really have any rules except to tell him when I was leaving and where I was. And, I could also lie about that. And I don't think that he ever really thought about it or suspected that. So around the time from like 15 to 16 is when I got into a school. It was called, I guess it doesn't really matter what it's called, but they like nicknamed it the Tulsa School of Arts, so it was the Tulsa School of Arts and Sciences, but it was nicknamed I think Tulsa School of Alcoholics and Stoners because so many people there did drugs. And I had 2 schools to choose from, and I had a friend at the time, and she convinced me, like, oh, this is a school you want to go to. And so I started going to that school. And when I started going to that school, I started getting into drinking with this friend. And I started getting into drinking pretty heavily because I worked and I had a job over the summer. And I think I had a job after school too. So I had like a little bit of money for, being my age because I didn't have anything to spend it on. And so it's like I could buy as much alcohol as I wanted to. And so around that time I started drinking. And then something happened where this girl and I had a falling out because I ended up sleeping with somebody that she liked. And then when that happened, things got really difficult for me at that school because that friend group, like her and the girls that she was friends with, they ended up really hating me. And so they would say things about me or they would post about me, and it was just, I think that, I don't know if they would like threaten me, but it was just like different things where it was a lot of pressure, and it was kind of a small school. So that made things worse. And then also around that time, I started trying Vyvanse. I tried it one time because I had a paper that I needed to get done, and I ended up really, really liking it. And so I started buying it because I had money. So I started buying that, doing that, and then I think after that, I started trying and getting into acid and also smoking weed more because I had tried smoking weed a few times, but at first I really didn't like it. But as time went on, I started trying a bunch of different things, and I ended up leaving the school because like I said, those girls really didn't like me, and it made it very hard for me to be there because they really hated me. And then I'm trying to remember. Oh, it was, I had so many absences. I think, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think they said I had like 60 absences in the first trimester. And uh, it was because like I would do drugs. I would, uh, go to work at night, and then my dad would give me the option, and I didn't have like hardly any self-control, or, you know, uh, I'm not thinking of the word for it, but self-discipline or anything like that. And so my dad in the morning, I don't think he wanted to drive me to school, would be like, oh, you're tired, you can stay home today, you can stay home today. And just having that option, I did that so much that I had like 60 absences. And so I ended up uh, dropping out and going into online school. And for online school, like if a person wants to, they can just, look up the answers. So I would just like, I think I technically do have a high school diploma, but it's just from like copy and pasting answers and uh, getting through online school that way. But so around that time, like things started to, I started to get more and more into different things. I was trying, uh, I think I started trying pills and different things like that because my dad had a knee surgery, and he had, I'm trying to remember, it was oxytocin, I think, that he had in the cabinet. And, I wanted to be cool. I wanted to like look like I was doing something. So I took some because he didn't like it. Uh, he didn't, when somebody goes through a surgery or something like that, it can be very hard on the body to take those things. And so it was just kind of there. And I had taken some, and I had like, I think told someone about it, and I'm like, oh, what's this? Can I sell it? What is it? And I didn't know that, people found it so valuable because a lot of oxys in Oklahoma, or at least, a lot of things people can find is fake. And so people are like, oh, where did you find that? That's like, I'll pay you this much for it. And anyway, so I started trying to do that. And all this time, I'm also like sleeping with different people and, still drinking and all those things. And so that's kind of how it was from the time that I was, I think, from the time I was like 16 to 18. And I remember, like, honestly, I didn't like sleeping with people really. And something I wanted to mention, because maybe that other people feel this way, but because I was already in that kind of lifestyle, and I had like a habit of doing that, I felt like I couldn't stop. I felt like I couldn't say no to people, or that, just because that was like my character, and that is like, I had that reputation. I didn't like have enough respect for myself to say no to people. And I also try to convince myself, with music I was listening to and things like that, that it didn't bother me, that I didn't care, or, I tried to really make myself as if like I was numb and it didn't affect me at all. And I'm also trying to think of a way to describe it, but I know like a lot of music is like, I do this and this, and I have this body count, and I don't care. And there's like a thing going around at the time, like it was like a quote like, don't slut shame, don't slut shame. And so that's kind of, it was really encouraged. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it was really encouraged, and I was suppressed that I really hated it, and I really felt horrible and disgusting. And, like I would cry, or different things like when I was by myself. And I think that caused me to keep doing drugs, because it was so painful. Like, people aren't meant to sleep with like one person after another. It's not natural. And so going through all of that, I think around the time I was 18, like turning 18, I had, gotten into a lot of stuff, more stuff. I had started doing cocaine. I started doing fentanyl because, like I said, that real oxys were hard to find in Oklahoma. So people had like fake fentanyl, fake oxys that were laced with fentanyl and different things that I had started to try. And that's when things got like really bad. There was a guy that I was talking to at the time that I really liked, and he ended up breaking it off. And during that time, I had got like a lot more into snorting fentanyl because I was so sad and hurt about that situation. And also around the same time, I got addicted to losing weight. So to take things back, I had a heart surgery, I think when I was like 9. I had open heart surgery, so every year I would go to the hospital to get a checkup, just make sure everything was good. And when I went to get a checkup, I remember them telling me my weight, and I was like, it was like such a good feeling to me that I had lost so much weight, because of the things that I was doing. And so I actually became addicted to trying to get skinnier and trying to lose weight. So around the time that I was, doing more pills and things like that, I was also became bulimic. And I don't really know how long that lasted, but I just remember like I would eat one bagel a day or something like that. If I had eaten more than one thing a day, I would try to throw it up. And around that time also, I started working. I had 3 jobs, and I don't know, I actually don't know why. I guess I was just trying to make money and keep myself busy. I was working like 60 hours a week, and I became really, it was really hard on me mentally, not eating very much and doing fentanyl, having those kind of withdrawals and going to work all the time. I had 1 day off a week, I think. It was just really exhausting. And then during that season, my friends and I decided to go on a road trip and do mushrooms. Like we went like glamping and did mushrooms, and that was like a experience for me where I was like, I don't want to do pills anymore. I don't want to do cocaine anymore. I thought mushrooms were good, so I'm like, I just want to smoke weed and do mushrooms at the time, because I was like, this is natural, this is from the earth. And after that, we came back. I think the day I came back, I had lost all three of my jobs because of the pandemic. So that was actually a good thing for me, because I had all this money. I went, I did this mushroom trip. So it actually helped me to stop doing cocaine for the time, but it helped me to stop doing fentanyl. I don't think I did fentanyl after that. And I didn't work anymore. So I ended up, my friend moved in with me, and I ended up just, we were on lockdown for a while, so we were just smoking a lot of weed, and kind of, probably, maybe kept me from dying, or, something worse happening to me during that time that happened, because, what I was doing was so hard on my body. And so this was actually, I think, before my 18th birthday. And then on my 18th birthday, we went to New Orleans, and I started doing more, not more, but like, because we went to New Orleans, it was my birthday. I was like, I'm going to do, some extra stuff because it's my birthday. It's my birthday week. So we were drinking, and I also but I also did Molly. And then when I got home, because I thought it would help, I started microdosing on mushrooms and smoking again when I got back. And around that time, uh, after that, after I got back from the trip, I became very depressed. I think probably because of like the chemical imbalance in my brain. Like it wasn't good anyway, but I wasn't good that I did Molly, which I think releases like all of somebody's serotonin, just like the thing in their brain that causes them to feel pleasure. It like releases it all at once, from what I understand. And then after that, microdosing was like a really bad combination. And so soon after that, I started to kind of like lose my mind, where it was like I was sober. I would go to work sober, but I would feel like I was tripping. I would feel like I was on mushrooms even when I wasn't anymore. And so that was happening for, I think, a couple weeks, where I just kind of felt like, I don't know, like, I was seeing all these signs, like the universe was speaking to me, like everything was spiritual and mystical all of a sudden. Like people would say normal stuff and I would take it as like, oh, did you hear that? Or I would speak to somebody. Like I think I spoke to this homeless man and I thought like, he just came out of nowhere and I'm like, wow, did you hear what he said? And I just kind of, like my mind started to kind of go there. But later it, within a couple weeks it progressed. It started getting worse, where I started getting really paranoid. And around the time I was started to get paranoid, my friend had went on a road trip. My best friend had went on a road trip with this guy that we had met in Colorado. And while she was on this road trip, which is like a few weeks long, I think, I had another friend send me the place that he was in Colorado, was Cortez, and I had a friend send me that like a post or something about how bad sex trafficking is in Cortez. So I started to kind of freak out, and I was already kind of like, my mind wasn't all the way right. And then, because of that, I thought she was being kidnapped. And so that kind of caused me to freak out. And, I was really bothering them. Excuse me. I was like blowing up her phone and things like that. I was, that kind of started things where I was more kind of losing it. And then after, I guess towards that, more into that, within like days and weeks and things like that, I really lost my mind. I started to, in the world, people would call it psychosis. I started to go into psychosis. I was no longer, during this time, because I was so paranoid, I was no longer able to eat, and I was barely able to sleep. So I would stay up, and I would also not eat any food. And I felt like I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And then any time that I would drink, it would have the opposite effect, where I would feel more paranoid. So I would drink to try to be able to go to sleep, and I would just stay up. And then I would smoke to try to go to sleep, and it would make it worse. And I would start, getting more paranoid. And it's like everything that I tried made it worse. Sorry, I had to take care of something. So I was at the part of my testimony where I was talking about when the Lord allowed me to lose my mind. And of course, like with all of that, I had also lost my job. I had lost my friends. I was scaring people, and I could tell when I would speak to people, I could see that they were on their face. I could see that they were afraid and concerned. But it was also scary for me, because I thought I was being rational. I thought what I was saying made sense. So when I would say something to somebody and they would look shocked or concerned, I was like, it was hard. It was getting hard to communicate with people. And I had, let me think. Another reason that I had also lost some of those friends was because I wasn't like fully following like the pandemic protocol. So because I wasn't wearing a mask all the time, or I would hang out with, more than people inside my certain friend group, I had started to lose friends, and people had started to distance themselves from me. I think already before that had happened, but definitely, when that happened, I had kind of like started to lose the rest of my friends. And so I'm trying to, I'm trying to remember how everything happened. But, so during this time, when I had started to lose my mind, I really knew that I needed Jesus. My sister had her old Bible in the attic at our house, and I had went up to, I think, find it or go get it, and I was trying to read it. I couldn't understand it, but I was still trying to read it. And I would try to pray, but I didn't I didn't even know what to pray. And I also tried to look up, I think I looked up a sermon, and I was listening to some random sermon by this lady. I don't even, it was like the first thing I saw, and it was more like a motivational sermon. But I was trying to like listen to something, and I had told one of my friends at the time, like, and I wasn't really saved yet, but I told her, like, I'm gonna become a Christian, or I decided I'm a Christian. And she was a lesbian, so I heard later she stopped being my friend, but she ended up saying that Zara lost her mind and became a conservative. I think that's word for word what I heard that she said about me. But so around that time, I was still like not all the way there, and I'm trying to fully remember. But during this time, I had asked my dad if I could see my mom, and he took me to see my mom, and she had prayed for me. So before she prayed for me, things were a lot worse, and I was a lot more paranoid, and it was a lot more like delusional thinking, and even like practicing witchcraft and different things that were going on. And I remember my mom praying over me. When I went to see her briefly, she had just grabbed me and prayed over me, and she had prayed, and she grabbed me and she said, I break the witchcraft off of you in the name of Jesus Christ. And when she had done that, I had felt like I was going to faint, and I had felt a clear difference after that. And when she was praying over me, I actually thought she was going to kill me. Like, I thought I was going to die. And it was probably the demons in me. But, when I had gone back to my dad's house, I had a little bit more peace in my mind. Like, I didn't feel like I was going crazy anymore, but I still wasn't sane. I wasn't all the way there. My family was still concerned about me going through psychosis and things like that. And I had gotten angry with them because they would give me like sleeping medication, or I saw like a pamphlet on the table that said, what is psychosis? And I picked it up and I was like, you guys think I'm going through psychosis? Because I didn't really realize that, how the things I was going through was affecting other people, or how I was being perceived when all that was happening. So anyway, I ended up, my dad ended up, not my dad actually, my brother and his mom ended up taking me to a mental facility. It was like a holding place for like 3 days where they assess people. And the first day that they assessed me, they said that I wasn't ready to leave yet. And they said that when they brought me in there, they told them that I was speaking telepathically. So I think that, being possessed with demons and things like that, that I was starting to operate in some type of witchcraft or something, not intentionally. But I mean, this lady, she was like I think she was a very strong atheist. She didn't believe in any of that stuff. And she told the psychiatrist that I was speaking to her telepathically. So, but after 3 days, I was able to get out of there. They gave me the diagnosis of person having bipolar disorder. They offered me medication. I said no, thank you. And after that, I went to live with my mom. So my mom and family picked me up from there. And when I started living with my mom, I started, to try to read the Bible. She gave me recommendations of pastors and people to listen to. So I would, basically I would sit down, and they had a shed. I would sit down in the shed and listen to sermons and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. Cigarettes was the last addiction that I had. Everything else I could not do because, like I said, it was causing me to feel more crazy and more out of my mind. And so that's the last thing that the Lord delivered me from. So around the time that I started to stay with my mom, there was one night I was staying with my uncle, and I remember at this time I was still having tormenting dreams. I was a little bit more right in my mind, but I would have tormenting dreams where I would wake up in the night and I would feel afraid or angry, or it was like very vivid dreams. And I remember waking up very early in the morning when the sun was rising, and I repented for a specific sexual sin that I had done. And it was, I think, the first time I had really prayed and repented for anything. And for some reason, I just had felt very convicted about this specific thing. And so I had got down and prayed and asked the Lord to forgive me for doing that. And I had felt, disgusted with it. And once I had repented, I felt something leave me. I think it was a demon. It was like I felt so much lighter immediately. And I felt something leave me and get off of me. And I heard the dogs in the yard, like chasing something. Like away from the house, it seemed like. And so after that had happened, I had a lot more peace in my mind. I don't think I was really born again yet, but I had a lot more peace, and I no longer felt very tormented. And so, around this time, I started to read. I started to listen to sermons and things like that. I had actually gotten baptized, but I kind of wish I had waited a little bit because I wanted to understand it better and really fully commit to living for the Lord, like knowing how to live for Him. But I'm also glad that I did, because afterwards I did feel more clean, like more sound in my mind. And I also wanted to mention that before I ended up in the mental hospital, the Lord opened my eyes to where I would hear and see His name. And that's something that really stood out to me when I started to realize that I needed Him. There's a lot of billboards that will have the name of Jesus on it, or something Christian, or like, call us, we'll pray for you. or even when people like my manager, because I was, I wasn't able to work well, and I was like making a lot of mistakes and doing different things at work that were frustrating. So he cussed at me and he used the name of Jesus. But when he said Jesus, I felt hope. And I was like, you know, like the entrance of his name bringing light, that's how I felt. And so when I would walk home or something like that, I would see on a billboard Jesus, and I started to, even I was still listening to worldly music, but if a song said God or something like that, I would think, oh, it's talking about God. Like I started to hear and see and be interested in the Lord again. And that was before I went to the mental hospital. But after that, so started to read, started to try to pray. But when I would pray, I would feel this kind of like warmth and heat, and I got scared, so I would stop praying. I didn't know if I was doing it wrong, or like I didn't know. I was like, what if I'm praying to the wrong God? What if I'm accidentally praying to, someone who's not Jesus? Because I had a lot of, experiences with drugs and different things. So sometimes, like when supernatural things would happen, I'd be like, is this okay? And later into that, I think to Lord willing, wrap up my testimony. Later down within a little bit of time of living in my mom's house, she ran into this guy because she was using my car. Something happened with the car where the car just wouldn't drive, and so she had to walk home. And when she was walking home, she ran into this guy who was like, "Hey, we're having a church service. We have an evangelist coming this week. Would you like to come?" And so that week my family was going, and I think the last day they asked, if people wanted prayer, and I went down, and this older woman had prayed for me. And when she prayed for me, I felt really experience and encounter God. I don't think I ever have before. I actually, I got down, like I couldn't stand. I had to bow myself down. And then because I wanted to be alone, I went to the bathroom and I shut myself in the bathroom, and I got down on the ground, and it was just such a beautiful experience. I couldn't speak because of how holy God is. I couldn't speak, and I felt so afraid, but at the same time I felt so afraid. I felt so much love. And it was the most beautiful feeling that I had ever felt. And it was so clean, and it was joy beyond anything that I could describe. And I really think that's probably the closest I felt to being in heaven that it would be. It was something that I couldn't describe, and it was so humbling. And I really, during that experience, I was just like, God is so beautiful. And I was thinking, why does God want to spend eternity with me? Why does God, I don't deserve to be with God. He's so beautiful, and I just, it was a really, really humbling experience. And I think for a while I just didn't even speak after that happened, and I was just in the presence of God. I felt so much joy. I I felt like Peter when he saw the Lord do a miracle, and he said, "Get away from me." He said, "I'm a sinful man," and I didn't tell the Lord that, but that's how I felt. That's what I was thinking. In my heart, I wanted to be with him so much, but I felt so, I saw myself, and how I was, and compared to him, and how he was, and after that experience, I had really, you know, I think the next day, I just was reading the whole day. I couldn't get enough of just spending time with him. And I had liked listening to sermons before, I was interested in learning different things about the Bible, but I didn't even want to listen to sermons. I just wanted to be with him, directly. And so that was kind of the beginning of my walk for real. And of course, a lot of things have happened after that. After that, the Lord had also delivered me, I think a few months later, from smoking cigarettes, because that's something that I had, after that experience, I think for a whole day, which was a lot for me, a whole day I didn't even want to smoke, but I did out of habit and still being bound to it. And, I felt his presence, after I smoked a cigarette, I didn't, it's not something I wanted to do, it's something I was addicted to, but I felt his presence, a little bit less, and then a little bit less. And I do want to actually add this to the testimony, as later the Lord allowed me to go to a conference in one of the ministries that I was listening to, Revelations of Jesus Christ Ministries, and they had a conference in Atlanta. At the time I was in Alaska, I was working, and I was able to fly there and go to that conference, and that's when the Lord delivered me from the addiction that I had to cigarettes, which was very hard for me to break. I tried to, smoke 1 or 1.5 a day, but that addiction and that yoke was still there. But after the conference, glory to Christ, he delivered me from that addiction, and that's when I started to grow more in my walk, and started to love him more. And it was a beautiful experience, a beautiful conference. And so this is my testimony of how the Lord saved me, how I came back to the Lord, and I give all glory to Jesus Christ. I'm nothing without him, and just grateful that the Lord humbled me. I'm grateful that he allowed those things to happen in my life so that it would cause me to repent, because I lost everything. And I used to think that, I wish that I was somebody who loved the Lord so much that I decided to give up things for the Lord, but the Lord had to take everything from me to save me. And, I'm glad that he did, because that's what I needed, so thank you for listening, and glory to Jesus Christ.